So right now I am on my way to meet up with some Bitcoin and cryptocurrency experts because there's been a lot of developments. For one, if you're familiar with Bitcoin, it recently did what's called a hard fork. And now there's another Bitcoin called Bitcoin Cash. A lot of people are asking questions about whether or not it's going to be valuable, what the hell's going on with the current state of Bitcoin, but there's also a lot of questions about regulation. So I'm heading down to, I think I'm going near the World Trade Center to meet with some experts who deal with regulation and cryptocurrency in general, so we can learn about what the hell's actually going on with crypto right now. All right, everybody, I'm here just outside of, what is this, World Trade Center 7?
Yeah.
7, with Ted Moskowitz.
Hey, I'm Ted Moskowitz, founder of Decentranet, and thanks for having me on, man.
Yeah, you are, you're a cryptocurrency expert. It's an easy way to put it.
Yeah, it's funny. I would say that the threshold for being an expert in cryptocurrency right now is a pretty low bar. But yeah, I know more about it than your average person on the street, I guess. And I used to be an attorney at the SEC, so I have a little bit of insight into regulation and that kind of environment and stuff like that.
All right, so really quickly, can you give us simple summary of what Bitcoin and the blockchain technology is?
Yeah, so Bitcoin is different things to different people. So if you were talking to your boss, you would say, hey, this is a really easy way for us to do transactions and send money back and forth between each other. If you were talking to your grandma, you might say, hey, this is a really easy way to do remittance payments back to somewhere else. If you were talking to someone who's more in the finance sector, you would say this is an immutable, so an unchangeable and fully transparent ledger of all assets. It's essentially a way of ensuring fairness in transactions, transparency in transactions, and having a way that a bunch of distributed parties can all agree on one thing, which is the blockchain. So there's different blockchains for different types of technology. Bitcoin is the most common one. People might also be familiar with Ether, Litecoin, and some of the others, but it's a peer-to-peer distributed ledger in its most basic form.
So it's just basically keeps track of transactions. Is that the simple?
Exactly, and people with like different computers all over the world are simultaneously saying, we agree that this is the block of transactions. We agree that no funny business has happened. We're all on the same page, and this set and all sets going back in perpetuity are legit.
So can it be manipulated?
Not exactly. So if someone controlled over 50% of the Bitcoin network, then they could literally change the rules. And in that sense, it could be manipulated, but the odds of someone ever actually getting that much computing power is very unlikely. Right now, the highest controlled percentage is about 16%, and people say it's unlikely that anyone else, especially as it grows, will ever control more than that. So in that sense, no. It can't be changed without changing the rules, which is really never going to happen.
Okay, so here's the big question for everybody. We've all heard about Bitcoin millionaires. Yeah. People have gotten really, really wealthy off Bitcoin.
Yeah.
There was some story, some guy who was going to pay $40,000 so that some Magic the Gathering pro player would use a specific deck. Simply because this guy just became so rich, he was like, I got nothing else to do.
Yep.
So here's my question. Why is it worth so much money? What's it at now, and why is it worth so much?
So Bitcoin right now, probably around $3,400 at the time that we're talking about this. It's an all-time high. I think why it's worth so much, it depends on who you ask. My take and the take of like most millennials like me is people have very little faith in traditional institutions. They don't trust the bank, they don't trust monetary policy, they don't trust the policy undertaken by the Fed and the fact that it's essentially 7 guys that all studied economics under the same one professor at Princeton in the 1970s. And they don't think that currency should be manipulated by people's political whims. So instead, it's a way of having currency and storing value where there's no outside parties making decisions about it. It's currency without policy, just pure and simple. And so, given the national debt and uncertainty in a lot of countries, people see it as a safe store of value, and one that, they think will have more value long-term than the dollars they have in their pocket, which, are subject to inflation and a lot of other financial wizardry, we'll call it.
There was a big spike a while ago because I think China started buying up a ton, and we're seeing a lot of foreign interests now. It's it's not just like it's a U.S. thing.
Yeah.
Countries around the world are interested in buying into Bitcoin.
Absolutely, and what? It actually makes more sense for people in other countries than it even does for people in the U.S. If my friend in the U.S. says, "Why should I hold Bitcoin?" I say, you know what? Maybe you shouldn't. It's not for you. But if you live in a country where the courts are corrupt, where the financial system is corrupt, where there's incredible bribery, where there's 5,000% inflation, like we're seeing in some places. Venezuela, Argentina, a lot of countries that have had these sort of credit crises recently. It makes sense for them to have a store of value that they know isn't going to fluctuate up and down. If you look at what just happened in India and what they did with their currency and removing small bills from circulation, overnight people's wealth is literally wiped off the face of the earth. If you're a poor farmer somewhere that doesn't even have access to a bank, instead of having cash under your mattress, it makes sense for you to store it on your phone in a way that's secured through biometrics, like a fingerprint or something. So it's safe money for a lot of people in other parts of the world, and the more we see uncertainty in other parts of the world, the greater the value of Bitcoin will be as people sort of flock to it as a source of stability in the market.
So recently, we saw something happened. It was called a hard fork. This was the introduction of what's now called Bitcoin Cash.
Yep.
What is Bitcoin Cash? I mean, look, I had some Bitcoin, and when this fork happened, all of a sudden I had some Bitcoin Cash that was worth money.
It's apparently free money.
Yeah, apparently got money out of nowhere. So
yeah.
What the hell's going on?
So what essentially led to this was a debate within the community about how to scale up Bitcoin. So Bitcoin right now has a 1 megabyte block size limit, which essentially means that because there's a transaction every 10 minutes, you're capped at 250,000 transactions a day. Well, if Bitcoin starts to get really popular and grow and there's a lot of transactions happening like we're seeing now, that starts to become a problem because you need more transactions going through, and so you end up having to wait, a day, 2 days for a transaction. So that's no good. So Bitcoin Cash was the proposal by sort of a splinter group, I guess, of the Bitcoin community that said, okay, the way to scale up is to change the block size, so how many transactions we can do in each block, from 1 megabyte to 8 megabytes. And the practical effect of that is you go from 250,000 to 8 million transactions a day. Now, the Bitcoin core team, the people that originally developed it, were like, no, not the best way to implement this. We're not going to go along with you. Instead, we have our own proposals. You might have heard of SegWit or Lightning that might get activated soon. And so those are alternative ways to solve the scaling debate. So Bitcoin Cash is essentially a fork from people that said, hey, we think we have a better idea than the Bitcoin core team for how this should scale up. So we're going to go ahead and fork it, and we'd love to have you join us. And so the new chain was created, and assuming you held your Bitcoin in an offline wallet whose private keys you control, you essentially get free Bitcoin Cash.
Yeah, I had a small amount in a Bitcoin wallet online, and I was credited with the equivalent of Bitcoin Cash.
Yep.
So all of a sudden I had a couple $100 in an account out of nowhere.
Yeah, and a lot of people say, oh, this is free money, which, you could say about like a stock split or something like that. But in this case, yeah, it really looks like people are getting something for nothing. The real question is, will Bitcoin Cash be worth anything? It's only if people start mining Bitcoin Cash and supporting the network that it's actually going to have value. When Bitcoin Cash first came out, it was trading around like $250, $300 in future markets. It shot up to $700 and has since kind of crashed down. And at least my take on why that's happening is it was really difficult for people to get access to their Bitcoin Cash and put it on exchanges where they could sell it. And so because the supply was so limited, the demand, kind of ratio just wasn't quite right. And so it went up a lot. Now that people are able to actually get it onto these exchanges and sell it, the price has already gone down pretty significantly. $100 or somewhere around there, I think, is where it's going to end up. But who knows? If people switch over and they say, you know what, the Bitcoin Cash guys were onto something. We like their proposals. We're frustrated with the slow block times, the Bitcoin Core team is doing. Hey, people might switch over to it, and then it could, go up in value by an incredible amount and be worth, theoretically as much as Bitcoin itself.
All right, one last question before we move on to regulation with your buddy. Will Bitcoin still make you rich if you buy a ton right now?
I don't mean to give anyone financial advice, and I think that's a really difficult question for people that have sort of been in the Bitcoin community for a long time and who bought it really low and who have already made a ton of money on it. It's a little bit easier decision for us to say, yeah, let's buy more until our sort of dollar cost average our way up. That said, I think that we will continue to see global instability. We'll continue to see problems in financial markets. Bitcoin is a safe store of value, and I think it will continue to go up. We've heard things everywhere from 10,000 to 50,000. John McAfee, our friend, said 500K. Within 3 years. I hope that happens, but I don't have a crystal ball. If I knew the answer, I would be on a beach somewhere chilling out, but not really because we're too addicted to the work.
All right, so then the bigger question following that is the regulation. And I think you've got someone here who's going to speak about that.
Yeah, so I can chat about regulation generally for a sec, and then we're going to talk about a tool that is sort of solving this problem.
Yeah.
So a couple weeks ago, the SEC came out with this guidance and said, hey, listen, this one particular offering called the Dow essentially was a security and it was sold unlawfully, and they cracked down on them. The next day, the FBI raided the offices of BTCE, which was a large exchange, shut the whole thing down. And so the original sentiment in the community was, hey, let's run for cover. The government's cracking down on Bitcoin and ICOs and all these things. And that's not my take. My take is that they're laying out the ground rules and saying, listen, there's a legal way to do this and there's an illegal way to do this. And fortunately, there are some companies like Securrency that saw this coming and have a solution already in place to deal with this exact problem.
Yeah, and it looks like there's a lot of exchanges that are based in the US that are insured, that seem relatively safe. I think, the government's biggest concern is, are you going to pay your taxes, I'd imagine, right?
Yeah, but then you also have the question of, are they selling these unlawful securities on the secondary market? So for example, there's token offerings where only US accredited investors are allowed to participate. Basically people who have knowledge, are wealthy, can afford to lose the money. If you're not an accredited investor, you weren't allowed to buy the coin at all. If you're an accredited investor, you can't then turn around and sell it to an exchange who's going to sell it to, like an end user who's not accredited, or maybe you, the person selling, can't, but the exchange, what they're doing is definitely illegal. There are large exchanges based in the US right now, or in reputable jurisdictions, that are currently selling these illegal securities, and yeah, I think a crackdown on them is coming.
Whoa. All right, so what's next? There's a tool, something you wanted to talk about?
Yeah, so we want to introduce my friend Dan Doney. He is the CEO of Securrency. They have a tool that on the ICO side allows people to conduct legal offerings that comply with SEC rules and the rules of various jurisdictions all around the world. So we'll flip it to him to tell you a little bit more about that.
You want to sit down, take his place?
Woohoo! Tag in.
Another expert. Yeah, tag in. So who are you?
I'm Dan Doney. I'm the CEO of Securrency.
So tell me what's going on. What's your proposed solution? What are your tools?
I'll tell you, Tim, the questions you asked there regarding what's Bitcoin going to be worth in the future is actually a fundamentally important question. When you take the principles behind Bitcoin, the reason why it has value is because it's scarce and it provides utility. Assets of that type, like gold, are speculative assets, so their value can vary considerably based on demand. They aren't backed by, or they don't represent earning potential. That is the ability to produce value. Things like real estate is a classic example. Startup companies or actual companies and their ability to produce income is real lasting value, in other words, earning potential. And so what our interest was in bringing those kinds of instruments to the market. Those are known as securities. What makes those kinds of a digital currency or a value representation that's backed by those kinds of instruments unique is they can produce a dividend. Their price tends to be much more stable, and you have a mechanism by which you can predict what its value is going to be. Is the New York real estate market hot, or is it not hot? The issue with this is, as securities, there's a lot of trust involved in the assessment of the value of that instrument. So regulators want fairness in the way that this is done, so that folks aren't offering Madoff-like schemes and tricking people into buying things of value that actually have no value. And so those investor protections are what the regulators are really all about. That's what the SEC is looking to enforce. So there's a set of rules. The coin offerings to date, many of these initial coin offerings that allow people to get into new offerings don't have these protections. So some of these offerings are great, and some of them are highly flawed. We've seen nothing coins, which are actually not backed by anything, and yet people that really represent no value and that people are willing to pay for in this market. So what we want is those kinds of investor protections so that investors are treated fairly through this model. That requires, and that's really the essence of our framework. Securrency is really the blending of securities and digital currencies. So just to be really clear about that basic model.
Makes sense based on the portmanteau of the words, right?
Yeah, you got it. So this is where we were 2 years ago when we founded. We saw how important this problem was. And folks want something that they can put their kids' college education in that's not going to vary in price by 10% a day, as we've seen with the leading digital currencies, that you can trust the value is going to be there the next day. So we want the benefits that digital currencies bring, that is the ability to transfer value anywhere in the world effectively. We also want them to be good value stores, that is investment grade instruments, and that involves adding the securities protections associated with those instruments. Now here's the big deal. This is why it gets exciting. What Bitcoin's really brought is global access to financial services. So with the distributed ledgers, I can transfer value anywhere in the world without using the legacy financial infrastructures effectively. But that's just for the transfer of value. We're bringing the rest of sophisticated financial services to people anywhere in the world. So we're working with developing world farmers in Asia, some of the world's poorest, unbanked folks, who get access to high-grade financial services that you would normally only get in places like New York City. So this is what's going to change everything. It opens wide access to opportunity, and it matches up capital resources to the places where the value is needed without intermediaries.
Wow. So you know what's particularly fascinating is that there's a lot of people who are like anarchists or libertarian, I guess you could call it. This sounds like globalization. It sounds like a way to connect people without a centralized authority, right?
Okay, that's a better representation of it. I'd say the concept, look, so rules do matter. Investor protection matters. You don't want people to be exploited by these opportunities. You want to make sure that when people represent value, it's done transparently and in a mutable way. This is what the distributed ledgers bring to the mix. So we didn't used to be able to do this in the securities space, be able to represent value in a way that folks can be assured as to what's underneath the hood. What that allows you to do is enforce rules in a new way to protect investors, but not limit the potential that exists worldwide. And so it's sort of a mix. We're light hand on the rule side, those things that protect investor value, broad access without exclusion.
So I hear what you're saying, and it sounds fascinating that you've got these farmers, people who don't use banking. One of the big challenges, though, I think, is that Bitcoin and cryptocurrency, it's really hard to get into. It's been a challenge. And is that just because it's new? Do you think that will improve over time?
That's right. So the things that we come to expect and that we're used to, I want to swipe my credit card and I want something to happen. All of that is a part of the legacy financial services framework. This is a framework that in developed economies has taken years to put in place and makes it nice and easy and convenient to engage in transactions. What Bitcoin offers is, and what the blockchain offers, is a mechanism that allows you to much more effectively engage in that transaction with all the middlemen, but the infrastructure is not in place to make those transactions easy so that mom and pop who know nothing about digital currencies can actually use this. This is a piece of what the Securrency platform does. We bolt on to legacy financial infrastructure as well as this new digital world. It makes it convenient to engage in simple transactions. So one of the things that's coming soon is the ability to actually buy your groceries with a credit card as you normally would, refilling the value in that card. Your grocery store is not going to take exotic tokens anytime in the near future, but they do take dollars or euro if you're in Europe, to refill that card with the value that you have in these digital tokens automatically. So convenience of transactions and the power that comes from access to high yield investment opportunities.
So you're kind of like a bridge.
That's right. It's absolutely a bridging function. We're pragmatic about this. We know that so much of the world's behavior, so many folks are so familiar with the old systems that what we created currently, what is going on in the digital currency world is folks are sort of out on an island. If you've got a lot of Bitcoin, you got a lot of Ethereum, it's not easy to bring that money back into the legacy financial system and then transact in this. So if you're working with folks who accept that kind of value, then it's great. It's just when you want to go back and buy shares of Apple that it becomes a tricky transaction. We're bringing those worlds together through a framework that is sensitive to laws, make sure that we are eliminating bad actors in the space, that takes advantage of the efficient value transfer and exchange.
So I guess I got one last question.
Bring it.
All of that, fascinating. But for the average person, I guess they're wondering, you've mentioned, people want a safe store of value. If you get everything you want, if these tools, expand, it becomes easier to be involved, are we going to see the price of Bitcoin and other currencies start increasing or increasing dramatically?
I would hope so. So in the end, the greater utility that these tokens offer, the more demand there is for the tokens. The more convenient it is, the more folks who bring their value into these ecosystems, when there's only a set number that are available, you see the price go up. Right now, most of the world, because these aren't in their current state very good value stored, all of the big money, the trillions of dollars that exist in these financial centers, is staying on the sideline. If we can build this bridge to bring that money over to the much more efficient space that's being offered, that's when you're going to see a tremendous increase in the value of these tokens.
Any final thoughts on?
We're seeing a revolution in financial services right now. Again, it's the tip of the iceberg right now. We need to create the mechanisms that make this ubiquitous. That means respecting the old ways and working with them. But as those get connected, that brings the folks who seek efficiency and access into the new world.
Right. Well, thank you both so much for hanging out. I guess we'll see what happens as time goes on.
Thanks, brother.
Thank you all so much for hanging out and watching. Full disclosure, I actually recently bought some Bitcoin. I've bought some Ethereum. I've been in the hacker community for a while, so I know a bit about, not too much, but I've been following this for quite some time. So just so that you guys know, this video is coming from somebody who's interested in the space. I don't want to make you think that you should go out and buy some or not, but just learn as much as you can about what's currently going on. So comment below and let me know what you think. How do you feel about all this? Are you still going to buy Bitcoin? Are you going to look at other currencies? I'd love to hear what you have to say. Click the like button if you like the videos. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Timcast. And if you want to support the work that I do, you can go to timcast.com/donate. Subscribe for monthly donations to help me do the work that I do. But I also take Bitcoin on that page as well. So there it is. There's the, hey, if you're interested in Bitcoin, I accept Bitcoin as well. But thank you all so much for hanging out. New videos every day at 4 p.m. and I will see you all then.